Hi everyone, welcome to the Jayda and Stitches show and welcome to a summery edition. Today we are going to make a summer kerchief. So whether you need a haircut, you're growing your hair out, or maybe it's just windy or you've got a lot to do, a kerchief is a really cute, simple and pretty, also very classic, little thing to put in your hair to keep it all in place. We're going to make today's really pretty little kerchief using Lion Brand's Summer Nights yarn. And we'd like to thank Lion Brand for sponsoring today's video. The Summer Nights yarn is a product we've used before. Last year we made our old country bridges out of it, and I really jumped at the chance to make another tutorial using this particular yarn because I really like it. It's a super fine weight yarn, it's really smooth, and it's got a little bit of sparkle running through it, so it just makes it the perfect kind of yarn to make a lightweight, very pretty, and just a little bit of a sparkly accessory for your hair. You can purchase Summer Nights yarn from Lion Brand directly. You can do that by heading to their website, and we'll put a link to their website in the description box down below. So let's grab our hooks, grab our yarn, we'll head on over to the craft table, and we will stitch ourselves up a really pretty summery kerchief together. In order to make our summery kerchiefs, we're using Summer Nights by Lion Brand. This is a super fine weight yarn. It's a size 1, so super fine weight. It's an acrylic polyester blend, so it's got a little bit of a sparkle running through it. And this is a particularly large ball. It's got 875 yards in it, but you certainly don't need that much to make a kerchief. You need around 150 yards for an adult, and less if you're making it for a child. So I could probably get 5 kerchiefs out of this one particular ball of yarn. This colorway is called Blue Lagoon. You're also going to want a pair of scissors, a yarn needle, a measuring tape may be very helpful in this project, and the hook I'm using today is a 3.75 millimeter. This is also known as an F or a 5 in the US. If you're in the UK, you can use a size 8 or a 9. You can also use a 3.5 millimeter or a 4.00 millimeter. Anything around that is just fine. And once you've got all that together, we can get started. We're going to take our yarn and we're going to begin with a slip knot. Now if you're not used to using super fine weight yarn, or sock weight yarn as it's sometimes called, then this can take a little bit of getting used to, so just take your time and be patient with yourself. In order to build our kerchief, we're going to be using the basic corner to corner block stitch pattern. So if that's a familiar pattern to you, then you'll have even more ease working this little fine weight yarn pattern. We're going to begin by chaining 6. So there's 6 chains, and you're going to skip the first 3 chains from the hook, find the 4th, and double crochet into it. Each block is 4 double crochet. Your 3 turning chains on the end count as a double crochet. You double crochet into the 4th chain from the hook, and then you double crochet into the next 2 chains. So a chain 3 and 3 double crochets equals 1 block. And that is the little motif pattern in the corner to corner block stitch pattern. So there's our first block made, 3 double crochets, there's the chain 3 on the end, so technically 4 double crochets altogether, that equals 1 block. That's row 1 completed. Now the fun thing about this particular use of the corner to corner is that we are only ever going to be increasing. We are just building a big ever expanding triangle, so there's no worries about working straight or squaring off. We're just using it to create a big triangle. So here we go for row 2. We're going to begin by chaining 6. You can skip the first 3 chains from the hook, find the 4th, or count back 3 chains from your previous block. No matter which way you want to do it, it's going to end up being the same stitch. You just want to use it or find it as quickly as you can. So if it's easiest to count backwards or count forwards, then you can do that. So skip 3 chains from the hook, use the 4th, or count back 3 from your previous block. Then you double crochet into the next 2 chains. Remember, a block is 3 turning chains plus 3 double crochet. There's the first block of row number 2, and now you've got something that looks like this, like a couple of little pant legs on a little 2-dimensional doll. How do we join our blocks together? Well, you're going to take your first block, and if you're looking at it so that your little sort of tie is up here and that's a double crochet, you want to flip it up so that now the turning chains are up top, and you're going to slip your hook right between the turning chains and the first double crochet. So see that space there? You're putting your hook right through it. You're going to slip stitch, and now you've joined the first block of row 2 to the only block of row 1. And now we want to build the second block of row 2. We're going to chain 3. Chain 3 counts as a double crochet, and into that space between so you're working around the chain 3 from that previous block, you're going to work 3 more double crochet. So knowing what row you're on is really easy. Row 1 has 1 block, row 2 has 2 blocks, row 3 has 3 blocks, row 4 has 4 blocks, and so on. Every row increases by 1 block. Every block is 3 chains and 3 double crochets, and that is row 2. It's easiest to sort of see your progress if you constantly sort of look at your work with the points facing up. So think of it like a mountain range. So that's row 2. There's the point of each block facing up. And now we're going to start row 3. We always increase because we're just building a triangle. So every row begins with a chain 6. You skip 3 chains from the hook and find the 4th, or count back to the 3rd chain from the last block, whichever is easiest for you. So you want a chain 3 turning and 3 double crochets, so you work a double crochet into each of those next 2 chains as well. And don't worry about what the rest of your blocks are doing while you're working that first block of each row. Just hold it however you need to. There's your first block of row 3. There's your turning chains, your 3 double crochet. It's probably hanging like this in your hands. You just want to always take your work and flip it up so that you're looking at the peaks. So remember the little mountain peaks. Mountain peaks always point up. So you want to flip your work so that your mountain peaks are pointing up. You jump across to that chain 3 of the previous block, and you slip your hook right between the chain 3 and the double crochet. Slip stitch to join. You've now attached your block. It's very important that you always attach your blocks because that's how your fabric stays solid. Now we want to build a block on top of this one. So we chain 3. Chain 3 counts as a double crochet. And into that same space, very easy to see, you're going to work 3 more double crochets. All into that space, you're working around the chain 3 from that previous block. Great, so that's the second block of row 3 created, and now we want to make sure we attach it. So we skip over here to this block that was part of row 2. Find the chain 3 that's at the end. Just slip your hook between that chain 3 and the double crochet and slip stitch to join your block. You're going to want to say that in your head a few times. Slip stitch to join your block. Your block isn't finished until it's been joined to a block from the previous row. Row 3 has 3 blocks. We only have 2, which means we need to work 1 more off the end of this block. So we're going to chain 3 to begin. Chain 3 counts as a double crochet, and double crochet 3 more times into that space, working around the chain 3 from that previous row's block. And there we go. When you stop, point it upwards so that all of your mountain peaks are pointing upwards, and you should have 3 blocks for row 3, or 3 little mountain peaks. Easy peasy. Looking very nice so far. All right, every row begins with a chain 6. That's how we begin the first block, and because we're always increasing, because we're making a triangle, every row has to begin with a new block. Every block begins with a chain 6. Skip the first 3 chains from the hook, or count 3 back from your previous block. You want to have a chain 3 turning and a double crochet into the 4th chain from the hook, or the 3rd chain back from the block, and double crochet into both of those remaining chains to make the first block. So we're on row 4. This is the first block of row 4. So you should have 3 turning chains and 3 double crochet. It's probably hanging like this on your job, on your hook here. So you take your work, flip it so that all of your mountain peaks are pointing up, and then you jump across over the peak There's the chain 3 from the previous block. You're going to slip your hook between the chain 3 and the double crochet, slip stitch to join that block. The block is not complete until it's joined to a block from the previous row. And now that's the first block of row 4. You've got a block to work here, a block to work here, and a block to work here, and that will give you 4 blocks for row 4. Every block begins with chain 3 and 3 more double crochet into that space. So chain 3, 3 double crochet, but a block is not completed until it has slip stitched to join to the previous row. So you hop over the peak to the next space between the chain 3 and the double crochet. There it is right there. Slip your hook through it and slip stitch. That completes the block. A block is complete once it's joined with a slip stitch. So that's 2 blocks for row 4. You've got 2 more to go. Chain 3 to begin. Work 3 double crochet into that same space, slip stitch to join in the space between the chain 3 and the double crochet of the next block. So you skip over the mountain peak. So there's the block. You skip over the mountain peak. There's the space between the chain 3 and the double crochet. Slip stitch to join. That finishes the last block. We've got 1 more block to work off the end of this one. Chain 3 to begin, and 3 double crochet into the same space. Beautiful. There's 4 blocks for row 4. 1 block row 1, 2 blocks row 2, 3 blocks row 3, 4 blocks row 4. And it's the same pattern from here on out. You chain 6 to begin a row, skip the first 3 chains from the hook, or count back 3 from your last block. You want 3 turning chains and 3 double crochet. That's the first block of every single row. So that never changes. Every row begins the same way. After you've finished your first block, you know you have to join it. Well, that means you've got to make sure your work is mountain peaks pointing up. You hop over top of the first mountain peak, find that space between the chain 3 and the double crochet, and slip stitch to join that first block. Then you're going to work a block off of every single block from the previous row. Every block begins with a chain 3. You work 3 more double crochet around that same chain 3 or into that same space, however you want to look at it. A block isn't finished until it's joined with a slip stitch to the next block, the block of the previous row, and every row increases by 1 block. So 5 blocks for row 5, 6 blocks for row 6, etc. And you're going to continue this little pattern, ever increasing a triangle. I'm going to let you go for a few rows, and I'm going to catch up with you, and we'll do a little measuring. I've just completed row 8. We're going to check just to make sure I've got 8 blocks. So I've got my triangle pointing point down, mountain peaks pointing up. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 blocks for row 8. And I have a nice even triangle progressing. So that's exactly what your work should be looking like so far. And now we're going to just pause and measure. For the purpose of this project, you're only really concerned with the measurement between the edge of the top block, peaks pointing up, and the top of the last block. So far I've got about 4.5 inches, or 11.5, almost 12 centimeters. You're going to continue expanding, so you're going to be continuing this corner to corner triangular pattern until this measurement from this corner across to this corner is approximately 40 centimeters or 16 inches for an adult. Now, if you're blessed with a beautiful head of thick curly hair, or just lots of hair in general, then you might want to go an inch larger, 17 inches or 42.5 centimeters across. It's not super important. We are adding ties to this kerchief, so you pretty much want these 2 points to go up and over your head and sit behind your ears. But if you're a row short or a row over, it's not going to matter because the ties are what keep this kerchief on our head. If you're making this for a child, you want to go around 14 inches across this top edge or 35.5 centimeters. Those are your approximate measurements to aim for. So now you just want to kick back, put your feet up, and continue working that corner to corner pattern. Remember, every row increases by 1 block, and it increases by chaining 6 to begin, and then working those 3 double crochets into the 4th, 5th, and 6th chains away from the hook. A block isn't complete until it's slip stitched and joined to the block from the previous row, and then you're building blocks on top of each block from the row previous. You can stop every so often, give it a measure, and I will check in with you around row 25 or so. I've done 25 rows of the corner to corner block pattern, and I know I'm getting close to my target measurement. So if I measure up here, I'm at 15 inches or 38 centimeters. So the reason I did 25 rows and then just to sort of give you an idea of where we're at is that I know I'm getting close to my target measurement. Now I want to make a triangle that's an even number of rows. So 25, it would be close. 26 might not quite do it, but if 26 is close, so if I'm even at 15.5 inches and my target is 16 inches, if I'm close enough at my next even row, I'm going to stop there because we are still going to put on a little scallop border, so it's going to get a little bit more width. And remember, we're adding ties. The ties can be as long as you need them to be, and really we're just trying to get the 2 corners to go over our head and behind our ears. So as long as you're close to your target measurement on an even row, then that's when you're done. So you need an even row, and that's how we know that our little scalloped border is going to work. So get as close to your target measurement on an even row as possible. And for me, I think that's going to be 1 more row. I'm going to do row 26. I'm going to measure it and I'll come back. And once we've got a triangle that's as close to our target measurement as possible, we'll put on the little border. I have made 26 rows. I am just shy of my target measurement of 40 centimeters or 16 inches, and that's where you want to be. You want to be on an even row, very close to your target measurement. So a little over, a little under is just fine, but make sure it's an even row. Now we're going to just smooth off that mountain peak edge, and then we're going to work a little scalloped border around the rest of our triangle. So once you've gotten to the end of your last row and it's an even row, instead of chaining 6, because we're not adding any more blocks, we're going to chain 1 and turn. We want to begin by very loosely slip stitching across those last 3 double crochets that we made. So try not to make them too tight. You're just slip stitching back across those 3 double crochets, and then you're going to slip stitch into the top of the chain 3. So make sure it's the top of the chain 3, it's not the space in between. And that's how we're going to start our little mountain peak smoothing. So you've slip stitched across all 3 double crochet and into the top of the chain 3. By not slip stitching into the space, you're helping to keep that block solid as opposed to having 3 a space and then a chain 3. So it's going to help keep our blocks looking nice and solid. We're going to chain 3 now. This chain 3 is going to help us jump from mountain peak to mountain peak. We're going to hop across to the top of the next block, that's the top of the chain 3, and we're going to just slip our hook into the top of it. Try to get a couple loops, whatever you can grab. Make sure you're getting right through the top of the chain 3 and slip stitch. Chain 3. Hop over to the top of the next mountain peak, find the top of the chain 3, just slip your hook through it, and slip stitch. This is sort of delicate work, so just take your time, but you're going to get a nice little effect like these open triangle shapes here running across the top edge of your kerchief. Make sure you chain 3 between blocks, slip stitch into the top of the chain 3 of each of those blocks, or think of it like popping from mountain peak to mountain peak, and just work that all the way across. I'll catch up with you at the end. Once you've chain 3 and slip stitched into the top of the chain 3 of each block, so all the way across, your little blocks are now separated by chain 3 spaces, and you've got sort of a nice little triangular space between all of them. Give it a little tug, make sure that you haven't sort of bowed the top of your triangle in. And now, off the top of the first edge of our little kerchief, we're going to begin making our ties. So we're going to put our first tie over here. Our second tie will end up over there. If you're making this for a child, you want to chain 61. If you're making this for an adult, you want to chain 71. So a lot of chains here. Take your time, count them out. Once you've chained 61 or 71 chains, depending on the size of the kerchief you're making, you want to turn your work, try not to twist your row of chains, and then we're going to just slip stitch into each chain all the way back. So this is going to take you a little while. Make sure you're maybe working on a flat surface. I find that helps. You're going to skip the first chain from the hook, and that may actually sort of tighten up on you. It did on me as you're turning your work, so don't worry, that's still the first chain from the hook. You just want to skip it. And it's very normal if your chains are all a little bit uneven in sizing when you're working with yarn this small. But you're just going to slip stitch into each chain all the way back. Try not to make them too tight. Like I said, working on a flat surface can really help. Just take your time. If you chained 61, you'll have 60 slip stitches by the time you get back to your kerchief, and if you chained 71, you'll have 70 slip stitches. Once you've finished slip stitching into all of those chains, you might have sort of a crooked, wonky looking little tie. Don't worry about it. You just hold on to the edge of your kerchief and just slowly kind of tug your way across that little tie, and most of that will smooth itself out. Plus, with use, it will continue to stretch and even out. And it's a tie. It's going to spend most of its time tied up underneath your hair, so don't worry too much about the aesthetic of your ties. Now we want to work down the first side of our triangle. So if you hold it so that there's the top, those are those little triangle spaces we made. Now we want to move down the first side. In order to begin our little scalloped edge, worked down first one side around the bottom peak and then up the other side of our little kerchief, we want to sort of slip stitch into the bottom of that first block. So if you sort of pull it apart, there's the chain 3, the 3 double crochets of the first block. We just want to slip stitch into the bottom edge of it. So anywhere you can kind of get your hook in there, just work a simple little slip stitch. And that's where we're going to start. So we've all slip stitched into the bottom of that first block, and now we're just concerning ourselves with the spaces in between blocks. And remember, blocks sit first going up and down and then left and right, up and down, left and right. So you're looking for, if it's difficult to sort of pull it apart, you should be able to see the spaces pretty clearly. But if you're not sure, just count 3 double crochets in a chain 3 facing up and down, okay. 3 double crochets in a chain 3 going left to right, there it is there. There's the next space, and there's the next space, and the next space. So if you're unsure, just pull it apart a little bit, but look for the differences in the angles of the stitches. We're going to begin by identifying the first space between blocks. Here it is here, and we're going to work 7 double crochet into it. So 7 double crochet into the first space between blocks. That's 7 double crochet worked into the first space between blocks. That space is pretty defined now. We're going to look for the next space between the next 2 blocks. So skip this block, here's the space between it and the next block, and into that space we're going to slip stitch. And that helps pull each side of our little scallop down. So now you get that nice little scalloped edge running across those 7 double crochet. And that's it from here on out. Skip the next block, so pull it apart, there's the space, we're going to jump into that space, we're going to work 7 double crochet into it. That's a lot of double crochet all worked into one place. There we go. 7 double crochet, skip the next block, find the space between it and the block beside it, and then just slip stitch right into that space. So you're working 7 double crochet into every other space between blocks, and in the spaces between, so slip stitch, 7 double crochet into the space between the next 2 blocks. Slip stitch into the space, well, here we go, look at that, pull it apart, there it is. So 7 double crochet here, slip stitch here, 7 double crochet here, slip stitch here, and you're just going to repeat that all the way down, and you'll get this really pretty little simple scalloped edge working. Once you get down to the very bottom, so you should have something that looks like this running down the edge of your kerchief. However many rows you had in your kerchief in total, so I had 26 rows of the corner to corner block pattern, you will have exactly half that many in scallops. So I have 13 scallops. Here's our little tail that began the whole thing, and right into the bottom point of your kerchief you're going to just slip stitch. You can worry about weaving in that little tail later, or you can crochet over top of it, whatever you like. So that finishes off the first side of our kerchief, and now we want to do exactly the same thing up the other side. So we've already worked a slip stitch, and you're just going to jump immediately into the next space between blocks and start that pattern all over again, working up the other side. So 7 double crochet into the first space between blocks, slip stitch into the next space, 7 double crochet into the space after that, etc. You'll have exactly the same number of scallops worked up the other side of your kerchief. Once you've continued that little scalloped edge all the way up the other side of your triangle, so there's the bottom point here, I'm going to weave my tail in later, we're going to work our last slip stitch into the top of this block where we chained 1 and turned at the end of our last C to C block row. So just chain 1, or I should say slip stitch into that top of that block, the chain 1, the slip stitch, whatever's there. You just want to sort of even up that little corner. Now you want to make your second tie. So you chain 61 if it's for a child, you chain 71 if it's for an adult. Skip the first chain from the hook, slip stitch into every chain all the way back. You'll have 60 slip stitch stitches if you've made it for a child, 70 for an adult. Once you've finished with your second tie, you're just going to slip stitch back into the same place at the very corner edge of your kerchief, just to sort of anchor that tie. And now we're just going to continue that little scalloped edge across the front. So you're going to work your first scallop into the first big space, slip stitch, scallop, slip stitch, and so on all the way across. Those spaces are nice and easy to see now. Once you've worked that little scalloped edge all the way across the top of your kerchief, and you've finished your last scallop or 7 double crochet, you're just going to slip stitch into the base of that first tie you made, sort of the edge of the last block of that final row of corner to corner. And that's it. You can fasten off. And take a moment to weave in your short tails. So just grab your yarn needle, you can weave the tails back in underneath some of the stitches from the last row, and don't forget about the little one down here too. Once your tails are all woven in, the last thing you might want to consider doing before wearing it or even giving away is giving it a nice light blocking. You can steam block it or wet block it, and if you need help with blocking, we have a couple of tutorials on both of those methods, and we'll link them in the description box down below. And there you have it, a sweet and summery kerchief, just perfect for the summer nights ahead. And thanks again to Lion Brand Yarns for sponsoring today's video. Also, if you like the summery style poncho I'm wearing, you can check out our tutorial for that. We'll also link that in the description box below as well. We hope you enjoyed making this along with us this week, and we will see you soon here on the Jayda and Stitches show. Until then, stay safe, stay crafty, and have a wonderful week. Bye everybody!
Hi everybody! Mr. InStitches here. Thank you for watching today. Here are some of our other videos you might be interested in. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.